Hey class, we chose to do our reading and understanding a research report project on an article from the Reading Teacher Journal called More Than Just Word of the Day Vocabulary Apps for English Learners. This article was published October 19th, 2018 by Laura Northrup and Elena Andre.
Hi class, my name is Stephanie Rigetti and I'm a middle childhood education major with a focus on English and social studies. Today, I'm going to tell you about the purpose and general rationale of the study we chose, the participants of the study, and finally how this study specifically connects to our class. First, I'll talk about the purpose and general rationale of the study. The main purpose for this study was to see which apps are most helpful for students who are learning the English language in a classroom. It was also to learn how to evaluate the different instructional components of these apps and to see how these apps can individualize instruction for students with different needs, teach new vocab to students, and reinforce older vocab that students have previously learned. Next, I'll talk a little bit about the participants in the study. These apps were found by searching terms like vocab and TESOL, which stands for Teaching English as a Second Language, on an array of different app stores. All of the apps chosen were free apps out of convenience for both teachers and students. The findings on these app stores were sorted by education category and popularity. A total of 164 apps were chosen for the study, but only 63 were picked for further analysis. All of the apps chosen are intended for instruction anywhere from the 3rd grade up until the 8th grade. Finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about how this study connects to our class specifically. This study has a very strong correlation to our class because we've spoken a lot about English language learners and the importance of these students learning vocabulary in their new language. We've also talked about, in general, how vocabulary instruction helps support reading fluency and comprehension for all students, whether they already know the English language or not. So the more words a student can understand, the more vocabulary they have, the faster they were able to comprehend a text.
Hey friends, this is Hunter Mikniak. I'm a double major in foreign language education and Spanish, and I just want to quickly go through the context of the study from our article, as well as the steps that Laura Northrup and Elena Andre took to study and analyze the performance and applications of these apps. The study takes place completely digitally. The goal was to have the search process mimic as closely as possible the steps that a teacher would take when searching for vocabulary apps. The focus was on apps directed toward students in the 3rd through 8th grade range. However, many of the apps tested can apply to all grade levels, even through college, for example, Quizlet or Kahoot. It was crucial that the apps were usable by English language learners. We as teachers want to be providing these students the resources to succeed, not just some online task that will only confuse the students more. Some of the apps could also be applied to students acquiring any second language. Especially during this time of growing language diversity in schools, technology can be a powerful tool to augment vocabulary learning of English learners. The study started with 164 apps, which were examined and eventually limited down to 53, which were chosen and closely evaluated. Researchers measured these 53 apps for effective vocabulary instruction, instructional activities, and effective technology practices. After analyzing the effectiveness and impact of these apps for vocabulary instruction and comprehension, Northrup and Andre discuss how teachers can successfully integrate vocabulary apps into their classroom instruction, which will be discussed later.
My name is Sarah Healy, and I am an early childhood education major. K through 3 is about the range I will be able to teach in. I'm going to talk to you about data analysis of our paper that we searched. So the data was collected through an Excel document tool, and it has every app includes effective techniques for vocabulary learning, and they were evaluated by Laura Northrup and Elena Andre. There were 2 different effective vocabulary instruction. The first one was direct instruction, which includes explicit and systematic instruction. So explicit is the definition of the word is given, and systematic is related words that are connected logically, say about like the same topic. And then the indirect instruction is when a student is reading and they find new words without formal definitions. The tool also asked if there were multiple exposures for each word, since many exposures help with learning new vocabulary words. If you're just learning it through a book, then you're not going to likely remember the word, rather than looking and noticing it in a book and talking about it, say with your family or your friends, so you're using it more, so therefore you're able to remember it a lot more. And then with our instructional activities with vocabulary, you can use matching, multiple choice questions, word banks, flashcards, true and false questions, word searches, and crosswords. But the 3 effective practices proven to show improved vocabulary retention is word mapping or webbing, structural analysis, or translating from one language to another. And then with the effective technology practice, the features that contribute to ease of use, features that enhance learning opportunities, the level of interactivity the student has with the app, and how much the app augments traditional instruction is basically what they're looking at in the apps. So when I mentioned augments traditional instruction, that's basically saying you're not taking away the traditional instruction of like vocabulary words. It's mostly a substitute for traditional instruction, just to do something different. You're still learning and teaching vocabulary words, but in just a different form. So the data analysis was qualitative and quantitative analysis, and it was designed to help teachers use technology to aid vocabulary instruction in their classroom, just like having a different way to use or to teach vocabulary to their students. And the study therefore wanted to mimic how a teacher would actually select a vocabulary app for their students, if they like certain parts about it, if it focuses on what they specifically want to teach with these specific vocabulary words. That's basically all they want to look forward to. That's about it for the data analysis.
Hi, my name is Sarah Guzwell. I'm a Spanish education major, and I'm going to be discussing the results and conclusion and citation section of our presentation, which is also at the bottom of our handout. For the results section, the types of apps that were evaluated from the article resulted in 5 categories of apps. 47% of the apps were games, 26% were language instruction, which is specifically translating from one language to another, 13% were word apps, and 9% were applications in practice, and finally, e-texts were only 4% of the types of apps. So the majority is definitely games. What's missing for most of the apps that would be beneficial for English language learners was a lot, and this really disappointed the authors. They were missing use of cognates, the student's first language, context clues, connections and associations, and pre-teaching words prior to reading, which are things that teachers should do when teaching vocabulary, but not a lot of the apps had these features. There was also not a large variety of app types, 63% used matching and multiple choice, 23% used word banks, and 19% used flashcards. Animation, automatic translation, voice recording, and extra free learning content were also largely absent. Although lots of these apps were missing these components, some of them did have them, which we will discuss later, as they make very good apps for technologically integrating vocabulary into instruction. Some positives that were present across many apps were that they provided multiple exposure vocabulary words, which means that the students see it more than once to help them retain the information. 75% of the apps provided feedback, which can lead to individualized instruction that teachers don't often get the opportunity and time to provide. They can also record student data and progress, which helps the student track where they are as well as the teacher. They incorporated visuals, example sentences, and most augmented traditional. The main conclusion from our article was that the author was overall disappointed with the effectiveness of the apps for elementary and middle school students. However, new apps are being created every single day. Just in the 9 months that it took to do this study, they found that apps are being removed from the market and added to the market weekly. Plus, the apps may not be perfect, but they are still beneficial in some ways to the classroom. They can individualize instruction, motivate students to learn, and help them use technology when technology is becoming more and more important in schools. Some cautions and recommendations for teachers from the article are that teachers should try using the app before assigning it to the students so that they know what might be confusing about it and so that they can plan ahead and see how long this will take and all that stuff. They can also search for apps that allow teachers to create their own word lists so that teachers can make sure that the vocabulary that's being studied by the students is specific to the units that they're teaching at that time. They should also understand the stage of English proficiency that their students are in so that they know what level of challenge is good and beneficial for their students. And they can try to integrate vocabulary instruction into all content areas. So science, social studies, history, any kind of teacher at any grade level can really use these apps, even though they might not have focused on this in the article. Also at the top of the handout, you'll see that under the citation section, there is a informational section about how to access the data from the article. It's an Excel document that you can download and save onto your computer. In addition, at the bottom of the handout, we have recommended apps. These were the highest scoring of the data that was taken by the author. The highest scoring was Quizlet because it has multiple exposure of terms and different ways to test students. There was also the World's Worst Pet Vocabulary, Duolingo for direct teaching of different languages, and Busuu Learn Languages English, and Kahoot. And all of these are really fun, and they had a lot of beneficial components to traditional instruction that are also being utilized now in technology instruction.
Hi class, this is Stephanie Rigetti again, and as a potential middle school English or social studies teacher, there are a variety of different ways in which I believe I can use this study to help my students in the future. One of the ways I can use this study is with my foreign students who might not speak or understand English very well, or maybe my students who don't even understand it at all. Using these apps can help these students learn new vocab and reinforce the vocab they might already be familiar with. This study is especially helpful if these students don't necessarily take to traditional methods of teaching. Overall, that's what the purpose of this study was anyway, to help English language learners learn the language and adapt to their new classrooms. This study could also be very useful for my students who might already speak the English language fluently, but struggle with learning and understanding new vocabulary. The apps in this study can help them to understand new vocab by using new methods of teaching. The third way in which I believe this study could be very helpful is with classroom engagement. Middle school age children get very excited when they get to use new forms of technology in their classrooms. This technology might also make the learning more fun, being that many of these apps make the learning the vocabulary seem like a fun game. It's more intriguing to students than learning traditionally with pen and paper. Specifically, as a social studies teacher, I can find use for this study because with history and social studies, there are always an array of new and unfamiliar vocabulary terms to be learned. A lot of this vocabulary isn't part of our everyday language. Therefore, this could possibly make it harder for a lot of students to comprehend and use. Specifically, as an English teacher, I can put this study to great use too. Vocabulary expansion in the middle age grades is imperative. The gain in vocab knowledge is useful for both reading comprehension and fluency, and without this knowledge, a student can easily fall behind. Therefore, this study can be used to make sure all students are making adequate progress and don't fall behind in either reading comprehension or fluency. The final way in which I believe this study could be very useful is to help students study. Many middle schoolers are just starting to take more serious tests in their classrooms. This usually causes a lot of anxiety and stress for the students. The apps talked about in this study, like Quizlet, are an easy way for students to be able to log and organize the material that they need to know, as well as helping them to actually understand and study the material.
Hi guys, it's Hunter again. This article was especially important for me because I'm hoping to teach high school Spanish in my future. Most of my students in the future will be primarily English speakers who are learning a second language, possibly for the first time in their lives. It can be an incredibly difficult subject to pique students' interest in, and studying vocabulary can seem like an incredibly tedious and unimportant task for many students. However, as teachers, it is our responsibility to create an environment where students can enjoy and desire learning. Especially with technology's role in our world today, learning apps can be extremely beneficial for maintaining students' attention while offering them a modern way to learn and appreciate vocabulary instruction, as well as, for my classroom, the Spanish language and culture as a whole. This study was primarily directed at apps that would benefit 3rd through 8th grade English language learners. However, the applications to other classrooms are endless. In beginner Spanish in high school, vocabulary can be one of the most difficult concepts for students to grasp. They've been learning millions of English words for years and can usually imply the words that they don't immediately recognize. And now they're faced with learning all of these new words again, as well as being expected to pronounce them all perfectly and learn how to combine them with the grammar they're learning. Vocabulary is clearly not priority for them at that stage of learning, but using technology and these apps can offer them an opportunity to learn vocabulary in an easier and proven effective way. We want our students to learn and prosper as teachers, and bringing technology into the classroom is inevitably the easiest way to do so. Everyone in our group, and I think most teachers, would find this article and this study extremely beneficial for adapting technology for the classroom and implementing these new apps to aid in vocabulary instruction.
So with me wanting to teach K through 3, this would be a good little attention grabber, I would say, for my students because their attention spans are a lot shorter. So that means they can easily get bored with if you're just having paper and learning vocabulary through like different paper activities online, and using a computer and having these apps will help grab the attention of the children and help them like focus on learning and actually learning. The different forms will also help, like say they can do matching or different things on these apps, so it's not always doing the same thing like they would be doing the same thing on the paper, but now they can do all these different types with a wide variety of activities that the children can use to learn. And I think it's also a fun way like to help them look forward to learning more, because sometimes they can get annoyed and they don't really want to learn, or they're just not in the mood. But if you pull out a computer or an iPad, I think that grabs their attention a lot more. So I can definitely see myself using this in the classroom at least once a week to have something fun and different and grab their attention.
I'm Sarah G., and as a future Spanish teacher for probably a middle or high school, I could see using these vocabulary apps constantly in my classroom. Even though they're not elementary students, I think that to acquire a second language, vocabulary apps can be really helpful tools for quizzing and making vocabulary fun. It doesn't just have to build reading fluency, it can also build speaking fluency as they learn different words in a new language. The Quizlet app seems really helpful for students since they can individually quiz themselves as they learn new words, and I can also create words lists that are specific to the units that they're learning, such as food or school vocabulary. It would definitely be really important to me that these apps are free so that all of my students can access them, and although the article focused on English learners, I think these apps can be easily moved over from learning a second language that might not be English. Duolingo, for instance, has a Spanish section where people can learn Spanish as a second language, and this would be very helpful for students. It also helps them use technology in a classroom that's becoming even more technologically advanced, since students have to take standardized tests on the computer and all of that stuff. So I think integrating technology is really important as they learn new vocabulary terms.
And this is our article citation. We hope you can all take away some resources of vocabulary instruction from this presentation for your future classrooms, and we thank you all for listening. Go Bucks!